Welcome everybody to the Council Workshop, 4th of November. As you can see from our items listed, it's a fairly busy, compact night. And so we've got a lot of things to discuss and work through. So with that, the first one is the PDI Act. And this is the elected members training that I believe we sort of was looking forward to having a presentation. So I welcome Victoria Shute from Kelledy Jones, and I believe David Altman will take us through the training and give us insight on where we're heading as far as the new Act's concerned. So with that in mind, I'll hand over to you, Victoria.
Thank you very much. And I've got to say, I don't think we could have timed this session any better, given that I have no doubt a lot of you would have seen that the new draft phase 3 of the Planning and Design Code was released for public consultation today, and also it's workable through the new planning portal. So I think this is extremely timely, because the content of the draft phase 3 code, as you'd appreciate, is going to have a phenomenal impact on developments in the council area. It might make some things easier. It might make unexpectedly some other types of development a lot more complex. So we've got the next 6 weeks to really pour through the code and have a good look at it, and for your planning staff to assist in preparing a response. But also it's very timely as well, because the release of phase 3 will get a lot of attention, and a lot of members of the community might start asking questions about it. And David and I have had a briefing. We understand that the council's going through a process of service improvements, making sure that its planning and development functions are operating in a way which is very customer service focused, and will probably end up being the best council in the state in that regard. So what we're aiming to do is really to go through the key points in the Act, give you all the understanding of, I guess, the most important parts for not only making sure that your council is well taken care of in the Planning and Design Code, but also to ensure that if you've got members of the community coming to you and saying, hey, what does this mean? What do I do, and how do I navigate the new system, that you've got that knowledge to help them, and also to report back feedback to Martin and senior staff as need be, to make sure that these customer service improvements continue under the new Act. So what we're going to cover off in tonight's seminar is we're going to have a look at some of the new governance structures, because whilst the new Act was meant to simplify the planning system, what it's actually done is it's made a lot of the backroom governance structural work a lot more complex. So you will, once the PDI Act comes into full operation, see a suite of delegations for the council, but the way that delegations are structured will be changed significantly. So we'll go through that. We'll also mention the council's changing role into the new planning system, which really can be summarised as an attempt by the government at the time to deliver on a promise to get councils out of the planning system, but at the same time still make council fund the planning system. So we've ended up with this very interesting structure and the council's role in the planning system. So that'll be really important, and when talking to members of the community, just to know who's who in the zoo and how it all works. We'll talk about EPlanning. So one of the fundamental, precepts of the new planning system is that enshrined in the PDI Act are requirements to make the planning system as a whole electronic. Now, this is going to be great from a council perspective, because it'll mean that a lot of records for development will actually be held in a centralised portal, so much like SALIS, where all information held by the LTO is available and it's publicly accessible. We're in the very early stages of EPlanning. It's got a lot of potential and it will evolve over time. But it does have the potential to greatly help the community access information in a way that's much easier than they can now. We'll talk about planning under the new system, some of the decisions, the assessment pathways and the like. We will also, draw everything in together and talk about how the council can continue customer service improvements under the new legislation, the hot issues to look out for, and what you might want to keep an eye on over the coming months and years, and keep checks and balances on to make sure that things are progressing as we hope. And of course, we'll talk about the planning and design code. And as I mentioned, you know, as of today, you can see what that draft code looks like for your area. You can work with it, and you can bring up properties and see, you know, what applies to that land. So it's quite, I think, fantastic that David can take us through that and actually show what members of your community will be seeing when the system is live and ready to go.
So we'll take you into some properties in the Barossa, and we can click on the map and show you the policies that will apply to that land. And if we get time, I can also take you into a phase 2 council that's gone live in the e-planning system and show you briefly how the e-planning system works.
And Bim, just before we move on, were there any questions that have come up?
No, I believe you're good to go, Victoria.
Thank you very much. So just covering off on governance structures. At the moment, as you'd appreciate, seeing delegations every time a review occurs, the council is named as a relevant authority under the Development Act. So relevant authorities include councils, private certifiers, and the State Commission Assessment Panel. What the Development Act does, though, and has done for over a decade now, is it says that whenever functions and powers are exercisable by a council in relation to a planning decision, the council must delegate those functions and powers to its administration and to its assessment panel. Now, so in effect, what that means is you've got your 2 sets of delegations. There's a set of delegations that go off to the CEO, and then the CEO sub-delegates to relevant schemes. And there's a second set of delegations from the council to the BAP to allow the BAP to make decisions in relation to certain development applications. What the council can decide is what development applications go where. So most commonly, what you see is development applications that have got public notification where representations have been received and representatives want to be heard. That goes to the panel. Also, your council has some triggers for non-complying development applications. And there is the ability as well for administration to, where they determine that a development application, it might not have had notification, it might not be non-compliant, but it's of significance, it's of importance, it might be of community concern, that development application can be determined by the panel. However, under the new Act, the council is no longer listed as a relevant authority for planning decisions. Rather, under the council's remit, the BAP and the council's assessment panel, manager, who is appointed by the CEO, are both directly named as the relevant authorities for planning decisions. So what this means is that the council can't actually direct what type of planning applications go to staff or go to the panel. Rather, the BAP will have to delegate some of its powers and functions with how development applications are assessed in their early stages, and the assessment manager needs to delegate off to administration as well to make sure that decisions are being made in a timely fashion. And this is how the government of the day managed to, quote unquote, remove councils from the planning system while still making councils pay for it. So the council still appoints the BAP. It's the terms of reference for the BAP and make sure that its members are performing as they should, but it's the BAP which is named in the Act as relevant authority, and certain types of development applications go to the BAP as prescribed by the PDI regulations. So what the government is trying to achieve is consistency in the entire state for what types of applications go to a panel versus what types of applications are dealt with by officers and don't go near a panel. From a governance perspective, it means, as I've mentioned before, there will be 3 sets of delegations. So a set of delegations from the BAP, Generally, that goes through to the assessment manager, and the assessment manager will then determine who the sub-delegates are. There needs to be a suite of delegations from the assessment manager down to planning officers. There will be delegations from the council, but they'll only deal with code amendments, so planning policy matters, building safety, enforcement and compliance. All of the planning decisions will not be in those delegations because they're not able to be exercised by the council. It's a unique governance structure, but you might get some questions from the community and people saying, oh, well, why does this decision not go to the assessment panel? You know, it's a big development application. You might have a development application for frost ban, for instance. It might be a great community concern. And the Act and the regulations will say that that decision must be made by the assessment manager. The assessment manager can delegate down and have officers make that decision with their oversight, but it won't go near a panel. And that is very deliberately designed by the government to ensure consistency in which applications go to panels and which don't across the state in every single council area. David, did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Victoria. What Victoria is saying is obviously correct in terms of council no longer being a planning authority under the new system, but council is still going to have a really active role in the new system as a body, because the council through the council resolutions will appoint the panel members. So you will appoint your panel members. The CEO Martin is required under the Act to appoint the assessment manager, and that person likely to be an employee of the council reporting to Martin. The council must fund, administer and pick up the liabilities of the decisions of the assessment panel, even though the assessment panel is a planning authority in its own right. Council will still be the relevant authority for building rules. The council, which Victoria will talk about and I will talk about more later, will still be responsible for issuing the final development approval, even though it's not the planning authority. Council will have a role when it comes to compliance. Council will have a really important role, which is probably its most critical role, in strategic planning and policy planning. And through the CEO, in administering the council, will also be able to determine what level of service council wants to provide to its community. So council's still going to be very heavily intertwined with this new system, even though from a legal technical perspective it's no longer going to be a planning authority.
David, you've got a question, and then I think Gary, you've got a question. David Davies.
Thank you, Bim. Yeah, I'm a little curious about this. The reason why a council exists at all is that we are just members of the community who can be bothered to read 600 pages of information once a month and hopefully make ourselves informed on that. And the reason why we're selected by the community is not because they like us so much, is because they assume that we will make the sorts of decisions that they would if they were in our position. In other words, that we are a true reflection of the attitude of the community. That seems to be lost in this process. Also, how does the community have any input into planning? It sounds like basically the way this has been structured is that the state government is centralising it and saying local communities should have no specific requirements towards planning or development into the future, that what is applicable in Ceduna is equally applicable in the Barossa or in Goolwa. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but why are we even involved at all if that's the process? Why isn't the whole thing then centralised? Why is the fiction of the council being involved? Because the community totally believe that we are in control of planning and development.
I know.
And little by little that's been disappeared. So I guess my point is this are we generally going to have a role to play? Because look, I understand, and sorry, I know it's a very long question, because saying that we appoint the panel members is a joke, because like if we get 4 names, We will do the best we can, but that's not really why we're here. And at the end of the day, we will ultimately take the advice from the people who put together the report. So what role does the community have via the council in planning and development into the future?
And you know what, you've picked up on the politics of the day when this act was a bill back in 2015. This was a bill put into Parliament by John Rao, who was not fond of councils at all. And there's been a lot of speculation about why we have this really unusual system which is centralised but then it's not. And I think the only answer can be that politically, centralising or planning decisions through the government can then be politically negative depending on how those decisions go. And also it costs a lot to administer. So we've got this really unusual system where councils have very little power over the new system, but are still forced to administer it. I think in terms of the community participation is that we'll talk about how development applications will have public notification, because there still is the ability for representations to be made where a development application is publicly notified. There will be less notification happening under the new system, however. But at the time that this bill was going through Parliament, what the government was saying is we want to focus community attention not on individual development applications, but on the planning policy at the stage that there is a code amendment that occurs. And that's notoriously hard to do because often members of the community, you know, it's an individual development application with its individual facts and circumstances that gets the community concerned or excites the community. It's very difficult to see the planning policy and its implications in the abstract. So what the Act does is it tries through the Community Engagement Charter and a few other new documents to try and get the community involved at the beginning when new planning policy is set, rather than at the end with a development application. But I think one of the roles of the council is to advocate for its community. One of the interesting developments we've seen over the past few months is we've got a new planning minister with a different approach to dealing with council. She is meeting with councils and she's been meeting with not only industry bodies but non-profit bodies and professional bodies about planning matters. So, you know, if there is adverse planning outcomes happening in your area, you know, the council will probably need to look more at advocacy and, you know, how do we have do we have a media strategy? How do we see if we can get this changed? Do we just put up a code amendment? What sort of support do we need? So I think that there's going to have to be, I guess, a lot more focus on that sort of strategy rather than just leaving it up to individual development applications and community support or opposition to manage those expectations. David, did you have anything to add?
So does that mean we do have the power to control plan amendments?
You can still commence what they're now calling code amendments, and the system is the same as it is now. So you initiate the code amendment. You do the public consultation, you do the reporting to DIPTI. That code amendment then goes to the minister with a report, and then the minister makes the decision as to whether the code amendment goes through as is with changes or whether it's refused. So that process still is preserved.
So that hasn't been lost. And in terms of, you said we could advocate on behalf of the community. Maybe the rules have changed or are about to change, but my understanding was that we're not allowed to interfere in the workings of the panel or exert pressure on the panel. They must be allowed to operate independent. And moreover, if they actually make a decision that we don't like and members of the community actually take them to court over, not only do we have to support it, but we also have to financially defend it in the courts. Yeah. Is that going to remain the case? And if so, how are we advocating on behalf of the community if we are in fact being gagged and prevented from actually expressing our views?
No, that position in respect to the council's relationship with the panel remains the same. And the council cannot exert influence or pressure over the panel in the way that it determines individual development applications. I guess what I meant by advocacy is that the panel and your assessment manager and their delegates will be making decisions based upon what's in the planning and design code. So if there's an outcome, and David will go through some examples that are in phase 2, which are likely to change, and because of how they're playing out in individual development applications. But say for example, I'll take a general example. If there was, you know, an industrial development on a block of land that could get through and be approved without public notification because of the code content, and the council was concerned about that, through the code amendment process and or through advocacy to the State Planning Commission and the Planning Minister, to make sure that that's how you've got to effect a change. So your role is not to, again, you know, influence the outcome of individual development applications, but rather the role is at the front end to change the planning criteria to make sure that decisions can't be made in the same way ever again.
But that is relying on the minister actually accepting our recommendation.
Yes.
At the end of the day, so for example, as you're probably aware, under the protection, Barossa protection zone, what used to be a Cat 3 development, like across the river at with the Oscar, is now a Cat 2, and that was something the minister did without, dare I say, the council's desire for that to occur. So what is to stop that just occurring? I mean, again, what role do we have to play if the minister can ignore our advice or our suggestions?
And this is where really what you're going to be resorting to is advocacy, to make sure that, you know, you can do the best that you can to make sure that it's understood what the negative impacts are, and you know, to help in preventing those code amendments being made. But in that respect, with ministerial code amendments, the position is as it is now, that the minister can come in over the top and change the provisions that apply in your council area with, you know, little say from the council itself.
The council can still have its visionary role. It should still have its strategic planning role, and then advocate on behalf of the community and with engagement with the community in terms of what you want the future of the Barossa to be when it comes to town planning. So you'll certainly retain that advocacy role, a very strong advocacy role, but at the end of the day, it'll have to pass through a state government and ministerial approval process.
Gary, Gary, you got a question there?
It was actually a statement, Mayor, just in relation to the delegations. Just for elected member benefit, we are about to present a report up to council with some changes to the council delegation to the panel, as it currently applies to the Development Act, because obviously in terms of the changes that are impending, the changes we're proposing is to align the current delegations under the Development Act to the intent of the PDI Act. So we'll be reporting that at the next council meeting. So that's something for councillors to consider as to how the delegations will move forward for the interim period until the actual code commences for our council area.
Thank you. You can just give me a yes/no answer, Victoria or David. When you talked earlier, Victoria, about we can look at how the panel performs. I'm assuming how it performs with their customer service relationship, and nothing to do with what they're assessing, but how they deal with it. Is that something?
Yeah,
so
that's correct.
Your customer service, we'll talk more about this as the night goes on. Your customer service in reality will be driven through the council's administration, because the council's administration, through the CEO appointing the assessment manager and planning staff, will be providing that service to your community, that customer service to your community on behalf of the assessment panel, because your staff will be doing all of the work on the applications in terms of customer liaison, applicant liaison, correspondence, reporting to the CAP, reporting back to applicants. So The CAP will be there at the end of the day, like it is now, to make the decision and give the direction like you do at a council level, but it'll be the CAP's administration through the investment manager that will do the day-to-day work.
Thank you. You can continue, Victoria. Yep.
Thank you. And I've just skipped through a duplicate slide, and I apologise for that. And I think this discussion is a good segue into, what the council can do and what its sphere of influence is, and particularly with, the customer service focus that is at the forefront at the moment. And I guess it's a good opportunity to raise some issues to consider and to keep under consideration and monitoring as the new system comes into force and is implemented. So the first measure, and there is a bit of work going on, and Gary might be able to confirm when you might see new documents, but it's having a look at the terms of reference for the BAP. So terms of reference documents for many, many years have been relatively the same. They're based upon model documents. They've got fairly standard conditions of appointment. But looking at, I guess, increased customer experiences, then there is the potential there to build in encouragements into the terms of reference to get the members of that aligned with what the council wants in terms of a good customer and community experience. So that's something to look at. Also, it is possible, whilst the council can't influence decisions of the BAP, there's nothing to say that as part of the terms of reference or otherwise that you can't have the BAP report to you on development trends, things that they're seeing that might not have good planning outcomes under the code, and also for the council to have, through reports or otherwise, a dialogue with the BAP about, particular community issues, and also getting some feedback on, not so much, again, individual development applications, but how planning policy is working and whether it's achieving particular objectives. So that's really important. And I think, managing that, it needs to be done in a way which can't be seen to be inappropriately influencing the panel, but there are ways where, again, you can use the panel to give you feedback to then feedback into code amendments, and also seeing whether there's anything that administration can do to, educate the community about certain issues that are important to them. The BAP appointment system is a good one to look at. So under the PDI Act, all of your BAP members, except for your elected member, need to be accredited under a new accreditation scheme that's governed by the PDI Act. So what that means is it's a fairly onerous process. Planners and other professionals have to prove their bona fides to Planning SA to get approval to be accredited for panel membership. What that's doing is it's bringing a lot of new blood into the system, into panel appointments. It's also meaning that panel members who have been around for a while might not be keen to continue to upskill because the accreditation scheme carries with it as mandatory CPD, are leaving the system. So a lot of councils are looking at alternative BAP appointment measures, such as going out for expressions of interest, and are also looking at ways to see who's out there and to get I guess to have a bit more of a complex appointment process. So that's some food for thought as well, and certainly some panels that have gone out for EOIs recently have attracted new blood, new people around, former commissioners of the ERD court, planners who are in consultancy as well and are working full-time in the system, as well as being on panels, and just some really interesting new people out there. So that's something to think about as well, as how do we actually go about appointing new BAP members when terms are up. In terms of community communications, this is going to be absolutely vital. And I think David showing you how the planning portal and the e-planning system work will help with this. But I think that you know, for administration in particular, they're going to play a huge role in helping individual community members actually navigate this new system. So the Planning and Design Code in its full version without the mapping, if you read it in hard copy, it's 3,500 pages. It is a whopper of a document. And for it to be able to be interpreted readily, it relies upon the EPlanning system to do that. And David will show you how that all works. So immediately, you know, that raises concerns about people who are not computer literate. How are they going to navigate the new planning system when they need to do that? You know, is the council going to be able to assist them? Is there going to be that help? Also, you know, I know that there is some work going on about getting in processes for, you know, for planning advice for members of the community that might not know the system, to be able to talk to a planning officer and to get some guidance in that regard. So that's going to be really important. Also, the Government Planners Say website, which contains the portal and all this information, that in of itself is hard to navigate. So, you know, it might be worthwhile thinking, you know, do we want, you know, somebody to be available at the council's offices to help just navigate that particular website as well? So I think, you know, that a lot of communication is going to be really important. And certainly if there are controversial decisions made on development applications, if something goes up to the state panel, or if something is determined by the assessment panel and, you know, they're just following the policy that's there, I think what needs to be kept under consideration is how do we communicate the council's role in all of this? What can we do to change it? And how can we get that message out there? Dealing with expectations is going to be difficult as well, because we'll 2 slides away we'll talk about public involvement in individual development applications, but the government's intent is to reduce that. And where there is notification for development applications that go to the panel, there won't be appeal rights for people who make representations. So, you know, there is a need, I think, to be proactive and to try and manage community expectations about the new system. And the council already has a fantastic collection of information sheets available on its website. It might be a good idea to see whether, you know, as issues come up, is there something that we can do to try and get that information out there? If people are concerned, is there a document that they can be given that explains the position, something to read and to help them navigate the process? So I think a highlight on an educational approach, which, you know, the council is doing already, it's trying to improve upon. I think that'll be absolutely vital to monitor and to keep working on as the system comes into force. David, did you have comments?
I'll just grab David Davies. He's got his hand up before you go to David, Victoria.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I seem to be hogging a bit of the time. In regards to the BAP members, I understand the need for them to have accountability and obviously to be well educated. I see a couple of concerns. The first one is I actually think this is more likely to limit the pool of available people that we can choose upon, for the very reasons that you provided, that it's going to be quite onerous. And unless somebody has a sort of a particular passion for this type of thing, they're unlikely to go through this process. And I guess my concern is, let's say we have a panel that we have decided are, let's say going rogue, but they're not exactly administering the rules as we would like to see them administered. In other words, they could, and this does happen from time to time, where panel members seem to feel that they understand better than the people who designed the code what the code should be, and sometimes that can create a conflict. What if we found ourselves in a situation where we did not particularly want 1 or 2 members of that panel to be there because we actually felt they were running counter to the community's wishes? But given the importance of their role, and yet there was no one else willing to put their hand up to take their role, could we run a smaller panel? How do we resolve that issue?
Okay. You can have a panel that has 3 members. So the panel member numbers are between 3 and 5. So a number of councils have gone to a 3-member panel. The only difficulty with that is quorum, but that can be resolved through having enough deputy members on standby. In terms of the pool, I think the experience for Greater Metropolitan Adelaide is that the accreditation scheme is being looked at by a lot of people is because it's official. It looks good on the CV for a lot of up and coming planners. So whilst there is, you know, a loss of people, I guess, who are thinking of retirement on that sort of end of the spectrum, it is bringing in a lot of, and this is just anecdotal experience from new panel appointments. It seems to be bringing in a different kind of, I guess, younger people, planners and other design professionals that are looking at it as well, great, you know, this is great experience. I can, you know, contribute. I've got a lot of knowledge in my professional role to add. So, you know, it's a bit of an each way bet really in that regard.
I guess in a metropolitan centre of 1 million people, I can see how there would be plenty of individuals. But as you get into more rural councils and even further out in the Barossa, the willingness to travel for 2 or 3 hours to a BAP meeting would be somewhat limited, where in the city you might only have to be travelling 20 or 30 minutes. And so, again, I think that that's sort of a city solution, which is fine in the metropolitan area, but how do we resolve that in an area where people simply aren't willing to travel?
Well, I'd say the travel thing is that's not insurmountable, because definitely there's been some fresh blood with some of your neighbouring councils, including Light, Adelaide Plains and Gawler. But also we've got the ability as well to have electronic attendances where need be. So,
okay.
You know, there are solutions away to it, but I do appreciate that travelling to Nuri is a different precept for someone who's based in the Adelaide suburbs than it is to travel to, you know, the city of Unley, for instance. In terms of the last part of your question, which is monitoring about performance for individual members, is that there are limitations on that. You know, and when you know, there's been a bit of work being done at the moment about looking at making sure that BAP members have a community focus and make sure that you know, they do their best to make sure that the meeting procedures and the meeting process is sensitive to the need for community members to feel, you know, that has been listened to, that they've had a say, they haven't been cut off in the middle of their representation, and that it's been too strict and too unfriendly a process. But really, in terms of, you know, if the BAP's making decisions that the community are not happy with, that's more likely to be a question about what's in the code and how that's working, rather than the question of, you know, how's your BAP performing? Because if the BAP's saying, well, look, you know, we've followed an officer recommendation and this is what's in the code, that's the decision they'll have to make.
So just
I think the argument was that
Victoria, when David's finished.
Yeah, I think the argument is that David mentioned that we have certain powers, and one of them is to appoint panel members. But that's only got teeth if we clearly then there is a recognition within that statement that one panel member is not the same as another, that some panel members will have a natural affinity and an understanding of the community, preferably people who live in the area, who actually have skin in the game, if you like, who have to wear the consequences of the decision in their daily life. This is the concern that I have if the pool becomes so small, because and we end up importing people from outside the area, people who don't live the Barossa experience and don't understand intimately our way of life and what our values are. I'm concerned, and this is why I was raising this, that we end up with people applying metropolitan solutions to a rural problem, and that has happened. I have seen it in the past. Anyway, I that's more of a statement than a point, than a question. Sorry.
John Angus has a question.
G'day everyone. Yes, look, I raised my hand and I lowered it, but I've raised it again because I couldn't agree more with Dave DeVries. The pool of talent that we are drawing from is being reduced dramatically by the you know, constrictions of you know, you must be qualified in this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, I agree. It is a major concern, and you know, we basically lose control of, you know, who is making decisions here, and against you know, who created the plan. That's all I have to say at this stage. Thanks.
And I think that might be before David Altman says something. I think as well, you know, you'll get the need for accreditation that will commence when the planning and design code commences. So we're looking at, I guess the intimation is by the middle of next year. That's something that, you know, as the elected body of the council, I think you need to keep on your radar. And that if you are finding that the people nominating for the panel don't have that local experience, you're losing that local knowledge, then there needs to be, you know, discussions with the government and the Minister of the Day, because that will require regulation change. But I know that there are concerns from other regions as well about that as well. Kangaroo Island had huge concerns because they've had community members on their panel for a large number of years. So yeah, you're not alone in this, and you might find that through the LGA and other group forums as well, there may be, particularly when phase 3 kicks in after 6 to 12 months, you know, a real push to have a look at those accreditation requirements. But definitely, I think you need to keep that on your radar.
Thanks, Victoria. Just to add to what Victoria's been saying is that, yes, council do have the ability to change panel members. If you were to look to resolve to alter a member and bring someone else in new, you'd need to think about procedural fairness in terms of that member and their performance, so that there's a proper process around altering the membership. So that would be something for you to consider. In terms of the poll, I tend to agree with you. If you become a panel member, generally you need to have level 2 accreditation, and from my experience around the state, and there'd be some exceptions, but predominantly the only people that are seeking level 2 accreditation are planners working for councils or consulting. And my view, and I think it was the intent of the minister, was that there be panels that have a mix of skills in terms of maybe real estate, agronomy, farming, business, architecture, the environment. And what tends to be happening is that because the pool of level 2 accredited people is generally planners, that most rural councils are appointing planners from other councils to be able to fill the positions. So I agree. I know of some people in communities that have applied for level 2 accreditation that are very experienced with community affairs, business affairs, that have had their level 2 applications for accreditation refused by the accreditation board, when personally I would have thought they would have been ideal people to be on council panels with a broad range of community experience. One thing to keep in mind is that there's exemptions for level 2 accreditation for elected members, don't need accreditation, and the ability for former elected members in your community to be appointed to the panel that would be exempt from needing level 2 accreditation as well. So there's a couple of things there to think about. But if and when you open up your panel for community applications to appoint new panel members, those sorts of people that I talked about, real estate agents, agronomists, architects, environmental experts, if they're going to apply, they're certainly welcome to apply for you to consider, but they would then, in addition to that, have to seek and be successful in obtaining a level 2 accreditation from the accreditation board.
John, you got another question?
Just a quick one. Thanks, Bim. I wonder whether there is a limit, or whether there should be a limit, to how many development assessment, or the BAPs, that people can sit on, because it appears to me that we have quite a few people around the state who have made this quite a career in terms of, you know, participating in a variety of panels around the state. And I personally, I think they should perhaps limit it to maybe 2 per person.
Just in further comments from me, Victoria, on your slide, just getting off of CAPS for a little bit, and I'm sure we can come back to it in terms of the educational approach with council's changing role. Just some of the notes that I've written down is that agree with you that education by council is going to be key to this new system in educating the public on how to use the new system, how to access the state government portal to be able to lodge applications and track their applications. How is the state government in association with the council going to train local builders, agents, tradespeople, community members on being able to use the new system? And then internally, Martin, from a business management point of view, customer service staff, internal staff, council engineers, asset services staff, in terms of getting business ready to use the new system. And I know you're well aware of that and would be working on that already. Fact sheets, your website, and how to help users. Victoria touched on this earlier, how to help your community use the system when they come into the front counter or ring up, rather than perhaps putting them in touch with people who quite often put them back in touch with you anyway as to how you're going to be able to assist the general public. So there's going to be a really important customer service and support role and facilitation role with council. I expect to help your community navigate and work this new system going forward. It's going to put stress and strain on resources, but phase 2 councils that I'm working for across the state are finding that this new system, although it's got a lot of promising signs, is not user friendly for the end customer at the moment.
Just really quickly on EPlanning, because David, because of the timing of the release of phase 3 today, which was quite unexpected, David will be able to actually show you how the system is working. But I did want to mention that the lodgement of hard copy development applications is still possible. And where that happens, it's the council that is required to upload them. So, for members of the community that want to lodge for a development application but have trouble with the portal, that option is available. So, and hopefully that will stay for a long period of time. I did want to mention, though, David made a really good point about organisational issues and just thinking about how this educational approach can be, put into place at all levels of the customer experience. Assessment timeframes under the new system have been tightened up a bit, and unashamedly, the new system, as people from the former DIP team have said, is geared up towards logging KPIs. So one of the biggest changes that we'll see is that assessment timeframes keep marching on and can't just be deferred, can't just be put to the side. And as they are now, an assessment timeframe might pass whilst administration or the panel or the developer or representative are in negotiations. So I think what there needs to be and what needs to be considered is how can we actually help people before they lodge in a development application to understand what might be required, what are the minimum lodgement standards under the new system as well. There are a lot more prescribed requirements for plans. Gone are the days where a hand-drawn plan without a scale can be accepted and people can work with that. It is very much geared up to having everything standardised. So, for members of the community that might want to be looking at a farm building or something fairly basic where the drawings are basic, is there a way to communicate to them that when they're talking to the draft person or to someone to get help with drawing up a plan, that they know that they're going to have to put a scale on it. It's going to have to show allotment boundaries and have a lot more detail than they need now. So, yeah, just some food for thought there. And David, just keeping in mind that you'll be logging on to the portal in a moment. Did you have anything else to add?
Not only when it comes to deemed consents in terms of timeframes that Victoria is talking about, and I noticed we're talking about deemed consents on the next slide, so I might leave that till then.
Sure. And were there any questions?
When we log on to the EPlanning system, I'll be able to show you in a live environment how the public and council staff will manage and process applications. So that will be a good insight, hopefully.
Sure.
There's no questions, Victoria, so you can keep moving forward.
Thank you very much. So as we mentioned before, planning in the new system is intended to be largely electronic. So we have our all-encompassing e-lodgement and information system from the government called Plan SA that has various arms of it. All relevant documents are there. There's a register of development applications and land division applications. There is also, which David will show you, a very sophisticated mapping system where people can access all of the planning rules that apply to their particular property. And as that evolves, that's intended to be a tool for members of the community to better understand what they might easily be able to get approval for and what they might have more difficulty with on their particular properties. I think the difficulty is going to be helping people navigate that website, and the question is going to be, how far does the council go in that? Will you have some resources that people can use? Will there be some assistance from staff? Will your counter staff know about that and how to help? But yeah, definitely some organisational considerations are going to be live there. I mentioned hard copy development applications. There is a trigger there for if they are received by the council for them to be uploaded to the system. But certainly there's a bit of a question about notices and communications, making sure somebody has logged something in hard copy that they're communicated to in a way that's appropriate with them as well, and just not through the automated portal. Community resources as well. I guess it is going to be a bit trickier for people to get their development applications in because of the stricter requirements for plan details. There is a limited ability for some plans, details on plans to be waived. And I guess as the new DAs come in under the new system, from an organisational perspective, there might need to be a bit of a discussion about, what requirements can be waived and under what circumstances. And that issue be kept, I guess, under some constant monitoring and consideration to make sure that, people are being treated consistently and with appropriate, I guess, understanding and compassion where that is appropriate. In terms of the planning and design code, what is really important to note that unlike the system that we have now, where it's a combination of regulations and the development plan which direct what pathway a development application takes in its assessment, that is all going to be within the planning and design code. So it has all the procedural requirements, the procedural directions, as well as the planning assessment criteria. In terms of assessment pathways in the code, the names that are being used are changing. So the first type of development is accepted development. That means that it does not need a planning consent. It just needs a building consent. So it's just looked at from a building safety point of view, and that applies to small outbuildings and other developments which are considered to be just completely non-controversial and quite minor. They do change from zone to zone, and I think what this council probably would want to be looking at is, in particular, farm buildings. If there's going to be farm buildings on an existing horticulture or other type of farming property, you want to have a look very closely at floor areas, how big the structure can be, to make sure that this easier pathway of development fits for what your community needs. The next pathway is deemed to satisfy. So what this means is that there's essentially tick and flick planning criteria. So if you meet the deemed to satisfy criteria, maybe with some minor deviances, you are guaranteed to get a planning consent. So this applies primarily to residential forms of development, detached dwellings, and again, development which is considered to be lower in its need for a very detailed planning assessment. What's going to be really important is making sure that deemed to satisfy criteria is appropriate in your historic areas. You don't want to have ultra modern, dwellings being developed in areas such as Angaston, which have very historic buildings there. That needs to be looked at, as well as, are there more avenues for deemed to satisfy developments? Again, thinking of farm buildings. If the farm building is large enough that it should have a planning assessment, that there should be some visual criteria to how the building looks, is that set in a way which makes it workable? David will talk about this in some detail, but some of the criticism of phase 2 of the code is that they were deemed to satisfy provisions for farm buildings, but the floor area was limited to 25 square metres. And in a modern context, a 25 square metre farm building is in most cases next to useless. So you want to look at that really, really closely. The next two pathways are similar in that they're both performance assessed. And what that means is like a merit assessment now. The assessing body needs to identify all relevant provisions of the Planning and Design Code, apply them to the proposed development and make a value judgment on balance. Should this be approved or should it be refused? Where a performance development is listed in the code as requiring public notification, the decision on it must be made by the panel. But where a performance assessed development application does not require public notification, then it is assessed by the assessment manager. And certainly for phase 2, and we understand that this has changed for the phase 3 version of the code, there has been a lot of controversy in that there's been deemed to satisfy pathways for frost fans, and where a frost fan doesn't deem to satisfy criteria, it can be approved without any public notification whatsoever. So we understand from a significant amount of negative feedback from councils who are using phase 2 that will likely change. But again, it's really important to have a close look at assessment pathways, because having defended refusals of frost fans in this council area on past occasions, they are just such a controversial type of development in particular localities. The last type of assessment pathway is called restricted development. That's replacing non-complying forms of development. Restricted developments go straight to the SCAP. They don't go anywhere near an assessment manager or the assessment panel. Hand in hand with restricted development is public notification, and appeal rights for representatives only exist for restricted forms of development. Unsurprisingly, in the code that we've seen today, very, very few forms of development are restricted. So that means that, in fact, the majority of developments in the code are performance assessed with no notification. So that means no public participation, assessed by the assessment manager or planning officers. Where there is performance assessed with notification, it's akin to category 2 in that people can make representations, but they don't get appeal rights if they're unsatisfied with the decision. David, did you have anything to add?
Well, just David Davies got his hand up just before you go.
Oh, sure.
Yep, David.
Imagine your surprise. Yeah, there's a couple of quick points. When this was introduced, we were being told or sold by the idea that this was for the members of the community, the punters. It was going to be quicker, simpler, and cheaper. I guess my question is a very simple one: is it? And how user friendly is the system?
So, from a phase 2 point of view, I can talk. Phase 2 councils went live 3 months or so ago, and I work for a number of phase 2 councils around South Australia, rural councils. So far it's not faster, so far it's not quicker, and so far it's not more streamlined. It hopefully it will be. What you're going to get as a phase 3 council when you go live, we don't know when, but let's say it's in 6 months' time, is you're going to get the benefits of the learnings of the phase 2 councils, and you're going to get an improved version of what we've got now in phase 2. But phase 3's got a lot of work to do as well in getting ready for when you go live. You've got consultation on the code again coming up over the next 6 weeks leading up to Christmas, where you'll get another opportunity to scrutinise the draft code and make comment on it, and that will be really important because the code is going to be key to this new system in delivering good planning decisions. But lots of teething problems at the moment, and I'll talk more about those in a moment. There's some promise in the new system, but there's a lot of work to do.
So so you said, and fair enough, that the faster issue, I guess the question is it when somebody goes online to log on, is it easier for them to make an application under the new system than it is now? And I guess the other question, I've been hearing that in fact it can cost almost twice as much to apply than it used to, which seems to be breaking faith with the whole point of this. Is that in fact accurate, that you can end up paying twice as much for an application than you did prior to the system being introduced?
So the fees are higher. The fees are higher under the new system.
So why is that?
Well, the fees are set by the state government through the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Regulations. So it's probably in response to councils over many years worried about cost shifting, and most council planning departments run at a loss, topped up by rates. So I suppose the government's listened to a certain degree with councils wanting to recoup more revenue to offset its costs. But
do we receive that additional revenue then, or does that go to the state government?
Most of it. So through the new system, the invoices are issued by the council assessment manager or the council's assessment manager's staff. The applicant receives that invoice through the portal and pays the invoice. That money goes direct to the state government, and then the state government distributes your share back to you on a regular basis. So at the moment, you take the fees and you distribute the government's fees back to them. It's going to be the other way around under this new system, where the government gets the money first, and then by regulation you'll get your slice of it. In terms of
sorry, just to interrupt, just so I'm clear, will the community in doing that believe that they're being billed by the state government, or will they believe that they're being billed by the council?
Bit of both. The invoice that they receive through the government portal is badged Plan SA, so it looks like it's a state government invoice. Okay. The money that they pay through EFT will be to the state government, but they're still likely to feel that the council's heavily involved, because it's going to be in effect distributed by the council, even though it'll have Plan SA.
I see. Yeah.
So sorry, can I just jump in? I'll just jump in there, David, because I think it's very similar to DACO.
Yes, correct.
So in terms of dog and cat registration, you're paying through the portal. So it's very much a state government system. In terms of the distribution of fees, the structure is different. So at the moment, we get a percentage of each of the fees. Under the new regulations, council gets certain fees and the government gets other certain fees. So it's 100% of a type of fee rather than a percentage of a fee. And the other element to it is that the portion that's going to government is actually helping to support the planning portal.
Yeah, and is that transparent so that the people paying the fees know that they're paying it partly to us and partly to the state government?
As far as
things that are tapped on,
as far as the customer goes, they will see a Plan SA invoice, and they'll be seeing that they're paying a system fee. Okay. They wouldn't see the portion that goes to council. They won't see the portion that goes to government. Not like what we do on our rates notice, where we show the landscape levy as a separate charge.
But they will notice that they're suddenly paying significantly more than they were before.
Those who are regular developers will probably see an increase, yes, for the average type of development.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of the public lodging applications, this new system, the system is completely new to them. So we're finding that some people are going online and giving it a go. We're finding most people will lodge hard copies through the mail or at the council's front counter. And as Victoria mentioned, under the new Act, they can choose to lodge the applications in hard copy through the council, and under the Act, the council must upload the application into the portal on their behalf. So it's a steep learning curve for everybody at the moment, remembering that the Phase 2 councils have gone live. So it'll be really important for Barossa over the next few months, not only it's going to be a busy time, not only in reviewing the code policy, but gearing up internally to be business ready for this new system with the training on the new electronic system. So it's it's certainly going to be busy times for everybody across local government.
And the other element to that, before you finish off, is that from our resourcing point of view, we'll be running applications under the old system and under the new system for at least 3 to 6 months as old applications are being slowly finalised. So not only is the community learning how a new system operates, our staff are also learning how to run a new system, their whole process, the processing aspects, but also understanding how the new pathways operate, how the new policies to be applied. So we're all going through a huge learning curve initially in that first 3 to 6 months, if not 12 months. So things will slow down quite rapidly initially. And then I think over time, as people get used to it, we might see some efficiency gains.
But what
Mark,
about, sorry, just
I just
finish
grabbed
up.
Mark, David. I just grabbed
Okay,
Mark.
yeah.
Been waiting a while.
Thanks, Ben. Victoria, David, I'm curious about two things. You mentioned the customer focus, which is where we're heading generally as hopefully as an industry. Furthermore, the one thing that concerns me is the planning portal, or having played around with it, requires some pretty bloody good internet connection.
Yeah.
And how are the phase 2 councils getting? How is that going as a barrier to actually providing a service to our customers? And the second one, I guess, for the learning from the phase 2 is a very good old friend of mine, and I had a chat to him a while ago. And he was very, very busy putting in 14, 15 different applications so they're under the old system in the southeast. What is the experience with that? Because that's going to be an interesting thing to manage as well.
Well, people prefer the old system because they're familiar with it. So similar to what Gary was saying, over time, this will become the new norm. It'll be the system. It'll be quite a good system. But at the moment, and this is a personal view, is that certainly for phase 2 councils, it's gone live while it's still being tested, which is a worry. It's a really important system and it needs more testing. DIPT is making amendments to the phase 2 code and also to the e-portal as we go. In terms of lodging applications, yes, it's just easier under the old system because we're familiar with it. But once we learn the new system, hopefully it'll get better.
What about the technology? The technological.
Oh, the technology. Yes, sorry, Martin. The technology we're finding with phase 2 councils, a mixture there. Some people are quite happy to go online and navigate. Other people are finding it a bit technical because a lot of the questions are in planning and local government speak when they work through the pages to lodge their application. People don't know what a detached dwelling is versus a row dwelling versus a semi-detached dwelling. A lot of them don't understand the language. So we're finding some people will go in and attempt to lodge an application, and then a quarter of the way through they will give up, and then they will ring the council the next day and say, "Can you help me lodge my application? I gave it a go. I got stuck." So the council planners and the council's administrative staff will then see them, help them over the phone. They will come into the counter and lodge their paper applications, and the councils will upload it for them. So at the moment for phase 2 councils, and it's half the state, finding that there's more time being devoted to this new system than versus the old system because it's new to everybody. And at local government level, for people like Gary and myself and planning practitioners, we're working with this every minute of every day. We live and breathe it, and we're still learning. So the general public will need a lot of hand-holding, absolutely. Just some general observations. the new system, just in finishing up on Victoria's slide, as Victoria mentioned, for applications that councils deal with through the assessment manager and through the panel, the performance assessed applications and deemed to satisfy, all of the applications you deal with, third parties will no longer have any appeal rights to challenge decisions of the assessment manager or the panel. There'll be the ability for deemed consents under the new system. Victoria talked about new timeframes and council being held accountable to those timeframes. Under the old system, if a council took too long with an application, the applicant would have to complain to the manager or the CEO or to the mayor or apply to the court to get the application hurried along. Under the new system, Minister Rao has turned that on its head, where he says if the council or the assessment manager, I should say, or the CAP has 20 or 40 business days, depending on what the application is, 60 and 70 in some cases, if the assessment manager or the CAP goes over time, it's turned on its head now, where the applicant can apply for a deemed consent. So that adds another challenge internally for council systems and managing resources, periods of leave, annual leave, long service leave, sick leave, etc., because you need to monitor the clock very closely, and the clock has alerts on the EPlanning portal, so that applicants, when and if an application goes over time, won't be in a position to claim a deemed approval. There's going to be the ability for more planning private certification under the new system for minor applications, and planning private certifiers will also have the ability to approve applications against the deemed to satisfy criteria where there's one or more variations to those criteria. So there's a few things that are changing there. There'll be no more equivalent non-complying applications under the current system that you'll be dealing with. Under the current system that you're dealing with, when an application is non-complying, as you know, you can refuse it as of right, and the applicant has no right of appeal to challenge the merits of your decision. Under the new system, there won't be non-complying applications anymore. The state government will deal with a limited number of what's called restricted applications, but all the applications you deal with will be such that all those applications that you deal with, the applicant will have a right of appeal on your decisions, either to the assessment panel itself or to the court. So there's some things that are changing that we'll need to keep a close eye on.
And I think as well, turning back to customer service improvements and achieving that goal, as David mentioned, with the phase 2 councils, there is going to be a huge need for assistance, for hand-holding, for guidance, helping people with this new system. And even though, no doubt there will be room for improvement with the new system, it is just the fact that it is brand new that's going to be very difficult to deal with as well. So, we've gone through, the need for education. Looking at the BAP, I think it's been recognised that the BAP's got a role to play as well in making meetings easier to navigate, people understanding what their role is, and also, making sure that people are listened to as well, and don't find the process to be overly judicious. And certainly pre-lodgement advice is really important, and it will be, I think, crucial for the new system for people to understand it, particularly with some of the new zoning and changes that we're expecting. Fact sheets as well, I think, reviewing what you've got, have staff look at them, and then making sure that there's new ones to complement what the state government is providing as well, will be really important. David mentioned telephone inquiries, but on top of it, all of this as well is making sure that the code does get a close review in its draft form over the next 6 weeks as well, that as best the council can, to road test it, see if you can run through some DA scenarios, see if staff can pick up on some types of developments that are of particular current community concerns, and see how they perform under the new system. David will run through some examples in a moment, but where there have been local media reports, huge amounts of representations, all of those sorts of things. Just knowing how that will play out under the new system, I think, as an elected body, will then inform how you respond to the draft code and the type of feedback that you're giving to the planning minister on what you're being presented with. David, did you have anything to add before we get into the detail of the code?
Not really that we haven't already covered, but as an organisation, whether it's Barossa or Murray Bridge or Kangaroo Island, where you want to pitch your customer service will be a matter for CEO and senior management to determine in association with the council. What I'm finding from experience is that it will be important for you to turn your mind to that quite closely and quite strongly in terms of working with your community and helping them with this system, because the whole idea of this new system, and I think it will work over time, might take a year or two, is the whole idea of this new system was to make it user friendly for the end customer. And so far we're finding for phase 2 councils, most of the training and education has been at a practitioner level and not so much for the end users.
Victoria and David, we're sort of into the last 15 minutes with the other things. I just might suggest if you've got some really key points that you really want to drill down on for us, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. What I'll do is, this was just introducing what David's about to do. What I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen so that the slides disappear, and so that David can show you all a bit about how the portal and the code's intended to work.
Thank you.
All right, so we've got about 15 more minutes, have we?
Yep.
Yep. I had a few more things to say, but I've just gone through my notes and I think we've covered most of them just in our general discussion and with the excellent questions. So given the time, I'll take you into these websites and we'll keep our fingers crossed that the screen sharing will work. So I can go into screen sharing now, Victoria?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm just opening it up. I'll click on screen sharing and I think this will work. I'm going to go into this website here and share it. Hopefully as I navigate the website, it'll show on your screen. Is that popped up on your screen, Martin?
Yep. Yep. We've got it. Yep.
Yeah. So this is what we call the Plan SA website. This went live today for phase 3 councils. It's the state government has put the draft phase 3 code out for a further 6-week consultation period starting today, leading up to Christmas, and they've made this website available to you and the general public as well. So how they distribute or how they make the public aware of this 6-week consultation period is, I think, something that you need to liaise with DPTI about in terms of how will the community be informed, how will the community be engaged, how can the community make comment, because they'll have to learn how to navigate this system, first of all, to be able to actually then turn their mind to the code and then to make comment. So when you go into this tool, it's quite good once you know how to use it. You can actually, if you can you see my cursor okay?
Yep. Yes.
You can click on here and it will take you into a map of South Australia where you can click on your allotment and see what policies apply to your land and what applies to your particular development. And it will build a mini version of the code relevant to your property. You can also go down here and you can call up the whole code, which will bring up the whole 3,500 pages of the code for people like Gary and I that may want to look at the whole code for the whole context of the state. But most people will want to go into here. So we'll click onto that. You can type in your address here. I prefer to go into the mapping tool. So you can click on SAPA, which is a state government mapping tool, and it'll take you into a map of South Australia. So you need to know how to do this. I know how to do it because I do it every day. So the public will need a hand in being able to learn how to navigate this system to form a view on the code. So we'll zoom in on the Barossa, and some of you might know my late father and grandfather from Tanunda and Roland Flat. I'm going to zoom in on Roland Flat.
David, that's not sharing that screen.
Isn't it?
No.
Yeah, no, you're still at the SAPA tool.
So what I'm going to have to do is see if I can bear with me. I think I know what to do.
So Dr. Altman was your father, was he?
He was my father and my grandfather.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
Yeah, both my father, Frank, and grandfather were both doctors. So yeah, my grandfather was one of the original doctors at Tanunda.
Yep.
And Dad in his later years at Tanunda as well when he was semi-retired. So let me see. I think I can do this. That brought up the map?
Yep.
What it's doing, Victoria, is each time I change websites, I've got to go in and reshare it. So I'll zoom in on Roland Flat.
It's probably because it's opening in another screen.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to be able to toggle between those okay. Fingers crossed. You can go up to here and you can bring up aerial photography. It will also allow you to use tools for measuring. You've got layers where you can bring up council areas and zones. And the important one for me is to bring up the cadastral boundaries here so I can actually see which allotment. And there's the vineyards here just leading into Roland Flat on the Lindock Road. So I can click on that property. And again, if you know what you're doing, you can then go, hopefully you'll be able to see this. It will then go back, take me back to the other website. Has that brought up the other website again?
Yep.
One with the pink at the top?
No, it hasn't, David.
No,
That's okay. So this is one of the challenges that we're having actually, not because of Zoom and Teams, but having to toggle the public and council staff having to toggle through different websites. So I'm going to go back
David, if you clicked on that plan and design code, that should hopefully have come up.
Yeah. So this should work. Yeah.
I suggest you go back to the map.
Yeah. Yep, I'm back in the map. Yep, I'm back in the map.
So share that screen again.
Yeah, it's taking me back to the map of South Australia. I've got another way I can do this. Is that on your screen now?
Yeah, it is. The map is.
Yeah, it's what I can do rather than using the mapping tool through SAPA, which takes me into another screen. What I can do is type in the address. So the mapping tool is much better because you can click on the property you want. So what's the road that runs through Roland Flat?
Barossa Way.
Here we go. So it's not going to it's going into a town scenario, but for the purpose of the exercise, this will still work. So it's taking us to 66 Angus Street in Tanunda. And what we can do is we can say that we want to undertake a residential development. Let's assume 66 Angus Street is a vacant allotment, just for the sake of this exercise.
David, we're still seeing the map of South Australia.
David, we're not seeing that, David.
Okay.
We've still got the map of South Australia.
I thought you said you couldn't see that one. Sorry. You've got the whole map of South Australia.
Yep.
Okay, just bear with me. I'll give this another go. Has that brought up the screen, Gary, with the pink at the top?
Pink at the top, yep. 66 Angus Streets and under, yep.
Has done.
You can see me scrolling down?
Yep.
Good. So let's assume that's a vacant allotment. We would normally pick it through the mapping tool. We say that we want to build a new house on that land. We want to build a detached dwelling. So you'd need to have an understanding of what a detached dwelling means, which means a single dwelling on a single allotment facing the street. And here again, we want to build a detached dwelling. We go down to here and we do a search. Is it still bringing up okay?
Yeah.
We do a search and we click on detached dwelling, and it will take us into the code. So rather than giving you the 3,500 pages of the code, if you click on this, the e-portal will build you what I call, in my language, a mini version of the code relevant to that allotment on Angus Street and relevant to building a dwelling. So for Gary and his staff assessing development applications, and for the general public to get an idea, because they can do this inquiry themselves at home, they can get a bit of an idea as to the likelihood of success or not. So they won't go through all the policies, but this is the mini version of the code for that land. And you can see here that a dwelling is envisaged in the area because it's in a residential type zone. The zone names change. In the old language or your current language, it would be some sort of a residential zone. Under the new system, the government have got a new naming convention. It goes into what's called a neighbourhood zone. But it's still the equivalent of your old residential zone.
So that table that we circulated via email this morning shows you that table of the conversions of the zones. Yeah.
So it says here that there shouldn't be more than one dwelling on the allotment, and it has the minimum site areas for a detached dwelling on an allotment, or if you were subdividing the land. And what the government has done, and this is what needs to be checked thoroughly through the next 6 weeks, is that the criteria that you've got in your current development plan is translated correctly over into the new system. So it has a whole...
So what they call these is technical numerical variations, is the new language. And these T and Vs are the things that we have to make sure we're comfortable with in terms of what our current development plan says for the current zoning and how they match up in the code. So Paul did a lot of this work before he left us, and we'll be doing that check as part of this next 6-week period.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. So I won't go through all of these policies because there's a lot of them, but this tool has probably built a 20 or 30-page version of the code with the applicable policies for a dwelling on this land at Angus Street. And this is what Gary will use to assess the application, and the public can see this online as well. So this is quite a valuable tool and a good tool for the public to use. And if we weren't sharing screens and we were in front of my screen together, You can toggle quite easily between the websites. You click on the map with the property you want, and that will then build a version of the code relevant to whether you want to build a farm shed or a dwelling, depending on the context of the land. What I'll also show you is a live version of the what they call the DAP, which is the Development Assessment Processing System, which I call the portal. So what I'm showing you at the moment is the code, which is the policy, and what I want to show you is the portal, which is the engine that manages the system, where people lodge their applications and where the council processes their applications.
So what this is, members, is the actual workflow that's built around the code, and the officers will be using this to do their assessment. So it's not only about the applicants in terms of their lodgement and interaction, it's also the assessment tool workflow that the officers will follow.
John, you've got a question?
Thanks, Ben. Just a quick one. So perhaps in light of Gary's comment, this is not a tick and flick for an applicant. It still has to go through the checking process of a planning officer? Question mark?
Yes, yes, it does.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So, but in terms of deemed to satisfy, then it is a tick and flick in the sense that if it is a deemed to satisfy type application, you're simply ticking to make sure that all those deemed to satisfy criteria have been met by the applicant, and if they have, then they issue approval. If it's a performance assessed, as David said before, it's effectively a merit-based assessment, and we have to basically look at all the policy.
Gary's correct, and it's raised a good question, because I think there needs to be more context on this system to inform the general public, because there's a chance the general public might jump onto this website, have a look at the block of land at Angus Street where they want to build a house. They'll be able to see the policy, and they'll say, "You beauty, yes, I can do this," and they'll do their own assessment. But they need to be fully informed that it's the council's assessment manager or the council's assessment panel or a private certifier as the planning authority that makes that call, and that they have to lodge an application. At the moment, I think there's the need for more alerts on this system to let people know what they need to do next. Because I think there's some risk somewhere, somehow, that somebody will form their own view because they'll think they've got access to this system, they can make up their own mind, and then they can go ahead and build. We all know that that's not the case, but the general public don't have as much understanding of the system as we do. Has this screen come up, Martin, Victoria? So this is what we call the Development Assessment Processing System, and this is in a live environment for a Phase 2 council. So this is an application here that's been lodged for a farm shed. I'll share it with you in the context of an information session, not wanting to breach anyone's confidentiality, but I'll open it up and just visualize a typical farm shed. I won't show you their drawings, but you can go up into the documents here and look at their drawings. This is not available to the public. This is only available to the council officers. You can do what I did before. You can click on that. It'll take you into SAPA, and the e-portal will build you a mini version of the code relevant to that farm shed at Wanaka, just south of Karoonda. You can then go into the application. You can see here that it needs planning and building approval. You can assign users to the application, and you can go into the application. You can then look at the documents. It won't go into the technical detail, but it's got to go through a verification process, and then once you've verified the application for it to become a live application, you go through and you assess the application. I'll show you quickly because I'm conscious of the time.
Yeah, we're going to have to wrap up, David, so if you can just do that quickly.
I'll just show you. There was a good point raised earlier about the way that the approvals and the invoices look. So what I can do is just show you one of those. So when they see a tax invoice, is this showing on your screen okay?
Yep.
So that's what the invoice will look like.
We
Oh,
can't
no,
see the invoice.
no, it hasn't opened the invoice.
Okay. Because it's jumped to another screen. So
Yeah.
what I'm seeing on my screen, and I might be able to quickly open it up. That should go on your screen now.
Yep.
You can see here that it's got the Plan SA logo. Over here it has the state government logo. It's an invoice that's issued through the portal to the applicant, showing the fees that they have to pay. There's also a compliance fee that they're required to pay now, which is a new fee, which enables you to generate a level of income to offset your compliance duties. And this is the receipt, but on the invoice version, it has the BPay and EFT details. The decision notification, when the applicant receives their decision, is also badged in a similar way.
Oh, we'll have to probably call it now, David and Victoria. So thanks very much for taking us through all that detail and informing us of where we all sit in the future. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting journey, to say the least.
It will be, and I think just wanted to wish you all the best. But I think the current initiatives that are being pushed to, customer service and education initiatives are going to put you a country mile ahead of a lot of the phase 3 councils. So well done, and all the best.
Thanks very much. Yep, thanks.
Thanks for having us. You have a great night, and if you need anything further in weeks or months to come, yeah, please let either of us know.
No. Thanks for your information and David,
before you go, can you unshare your screen, please?
Yep, got it.
Okay, now we'll turn to our next item on our agenda for the workshop, which is the master planning aquatics. And Joe, you want to take us through this document, which is following on from Council's decision to move into the consultation stages, which we've been talking about.
Yeah, thank Can you hear me? I think I've just unmuted myself, hopefully.
There you
good.
are. Yep.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So Martin's just going to share the screen fully.
Yep.
You got it?
It is there, yes.
It's there, but it's got the slides down the side as well as the.
You need to go to slideshow.
There we go. Thank you. So, yes, this is a relatively short synopsis of the actions that we've taken since the September resolution. And this is based around the resolution that has determined to close the pool and to look at opportunities to provide emerging aquatic facilities that and that council explore low capital and operational cost options for future consideration. So just to walk through that. So in terms of where we're up to, we have briefed, and I think I sent an email around to elected members, Wax Designs, specifically for this piece of work, given their strong background in consultation on complex projects of this nature. They also have a really good track record of consulting with young people and a real pedigree around open space development. So we thought it was important to have a group that we have knowledge of, that have worked with us. They've done work around the Angaston Railway Station precinct, and they know how we go about things, and I think they will be a really good fit for navigating some of the challenges of this particular issue. So we provided them with all of the historic information that we can, and with an instruction for them to provide a return brief to us. Unfortunately, that's been delayed a little bit because of some ill health at their end, but we are back on track now. And they've prepared a quotation, and that includes a range of different activities and also an assessment of elements of a future service delivery that looks at both the social, economics and community outcomes of a future facility and what that could look like. Also, they will consult with specialised aquatic facilities planners and engineers, and also look at the cost impacts. So the various options that might be presented will have a look at an assessment of the ongoing impact on rates to cover expenditure, and how that impacts on the modelling and the perception the community may have of each of those scenarios, so that we're hopefully giving sufficient information for ratepayers and residents to assess what those different options might mean from both a cost and a service provision perspective. So to achieve that, they will do a small feasibility for each scenario, very much with the lens of we're putting this out to the community, and we want it to be easily digestible and understandable and meaningful for all of our different groups. So to work our way through that, we've agreed with them a fairly high level consultation tree process, which they're now refining and looking at in more detail. And I received a bit more from them today prior to or after we put this document together, but it just goes into a little more detail to what we've put here in the high level document. So I won't talk all the way through that tree. I think it's fairly easy to follow, but it's really trying to break down the questions that we ask the community into easily recognisable chunks to say why we're at the situation that we're at, and then to ask questions that will easily, through a yes and no process, guide people through a consultation process, and then give them the opportunity to have further information that they can then provide feedback and comment on, both in relation to a new facility, the existing other facilities that we have, and also the reuse of the current pool site. But the intent is that this would go out in both a paper-based format and also an electronic format through our website and our social engagement platform. On to the next slide. So the intent is to consult with all ratepayers on their options and preferences.
Just a minute, Joe. Martin, did you want to jump in there?
No, just when Joe's finished.
Okay, carry on, Joe. Sorry.
So yes, to all ratepayers, but also when we have done previous feedback, both in relation to the pool and the recs, etc., we have also very much wanted to give other residents who will also use these facilities the opportunity to feedback as well and provide input. So those options will and opportunities will be considered. Then through that process, there'll also be an invitation for people to be part of community reference groups to guide further investigations and test out the different scenarios that we come up with. We may or may not get buy into that, we'll see. But again, that's something that WACS have used extensively in the past and are keen to use for this. Also potential for workshops with random groups of people from the mail out feedback that again may or may not want to be involved in that next level of input. The groups that have a specific vested interest in both location and facilities and pools and aquatics, and also making sure that we have captured as much as we possibly can people with potentially an underrepresentation in the feedback process. We will come up with report points and milestones that we will come back to council with as we go through that process and the time frame, being very mindful of the summer months and the current season of the pool. And then based on that, they will start to look at master planning based on the consultation outcomes that have come out of the feedback process. And then the final slide is just a summary of the indicative costs to undertake all of that different phases of work. That's pretty high level at the moment, but wanted to make sure that you were aware that it is a fairly costly exercise for us to achieve that as requested. So that's pretty much all I have got at this stage. Hand over to questions and Martin.
So Martin and then David DeVries and then John Angus.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Ben. I only want two simple comments. I just want to alert everybody to the statutory requirements. We can't actually start debating an issue which we've already debated. All we're doing here is acting on one component of the resolution from September, which is consulting on that bit that Joe's talking about, which talks about an EG. So therefore it's not limited to anything. Obviously we're doing our best to interpret what is being put in front of us. The other component really is just to alert all to, I guess, the ability to do this also around obviously need and in a phased approach depending how we can go through the process. They're my two main comments.
Thank you. David DeVries.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, look, well done, Joe. I think this is a very simple and easy to understand breakdown, which encapsulates the gist of what we've all been talking about over the last year and a half. And I particularly like the consultation tree. I think that sort of lays it out graphically in a very sensible approach. Just feedback, I'm sure every other councillor has received a significant amount of input from various members of the council, of the community, both through written form and also through conversation. So in a way, we've already begun a consultation process, albeit informally, and that we're certainly, I can't speak to the rest of you, I've got a pretty good idea of how a lot of members of the community feel about where we want to go. One point that keeps coming up a number of times, and I think this is possibly can be accommodated in this current structure, but a number of people have asked me why we felt the need to shut down the pool, and when I explained the costs and so on, what the feeling was for many was that they'd like to see some sort of updated engineering report, given that the last one was, I think, about 5 years old from memory. And I'm just wondering if maybe that could be inserted in there at some point, just so that, you know, the numbers that we're actually exploring have teeth. the reason why I believe the council went down the road that we did from all our conversations is that we felt that the current pool can't last indefinitely. There has been some discussion by various individuals about, well, couldn't you keep the pool running for another 5 years, another 10, another 15, whatever? My personal view is that if we're going to look at it, if we're going to do an apples with apples comparison of what the current state of the Neri pool is with possible alternatives, I think we need to be thinking about the fact that if we were to keep the Neri pool, which we've decided we haven't, but in that hypothetical situation, you wouldn't just be keeping it for another 5 years, you'd be wanting to keep it for at least 20. And so I'd like to see some sort of engineers report that said, you know, the cost of keeping this pool in a commission form for the next 20 years would be A, B, C, and D. That's just a suggestion. I don't know how the rest of the council feel about that. But when individuals start to understand that it's not just a hole in the ground, it's the filtering system and you know, all of the other elements that are involved, including the kiddies pool, and the fact that when the pool was created, diving was possible, now it isn't, and so on and so on and so on. They start to recognise the issues that we're dealing with, and I find that as people understand better the rationale behind it, they start to feel more comfortable with the decision that has been made. So if those costs could be actually, you know, the going forward option versus the if we were just to keep things as they are, and if we hoped that the pool would last for 20 years, this is what the other alternative would be. I think that would be valuable, because I think some people have the idea that if we just do nothing, that somehow there's not going to be a cost. But as we all know, just keeping the pool, you know, that we've currently got alive is going to get more and more and more and more expensive. No matter what option we do, it's going to be expensive. I just think both alternatives need to be have some numbers against them. So I would put that into the feasibilities and the anticipated costs section if that was something that we wanted to go. Thanks, Ben.
I guess the thing that I probably need to tease out a little bit more is, you know, the way I'm reading it and viewing it here is that we have decided on the pool closure, and I want to park that for now and highlight the fact is that part of that decision included going out to consultation, and I think we need to just focus now on what that consultation will look like, because the people that I've been talking to, and that's been a number within the group, is I've highlighted quite clearly that we are going out to consultation. Our rate notices went out with notices which clearly said to every ratepayer, this is the next step we're about to move forward through. Now, and I think our key focus now is to sort of try to get this consultation process out there as quickly as we can, and then we can tease out some of the detail once we've spoken and had the consultation with the whole community. Because at the particular time, I guess, and I'm not disputing the letters and the comments that's come in at this particular stage, but it is only a small sample of the community. And I think the important thing that we've now gone out with our rate notices and clearly demonstrated to everybody, this is our position. And I've encouraged those people at the meetings that I've attended is, let us go through the process and we see what shakes out. And I've had agreement from them, but I guess there's now this other option of save the pool. Well, I'd like us to park save the pool for now and just move on with how we're going to consult and get some really positive feedback from everybody, and then work out how we're going to progress. I think some of that other detail will then get teased out as we progress. Your points are valid, David. I'm not disputing that, but, you know, I'd just like us to get that broad communication.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting we don't do that, Bim, and I certainly wasn't suggesting a quote unquote save the pool thing. What I was saying is that the numbers that inform the decision, I think, need to be very clear to the community so they understand exactly why we made the decision that we did.
And you're suggesting that's part of the why?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. John, Angus?
Thanks, everyone. I agree with Dave in that so much of this issue has been sort of clouded in too much discussion over too many years with too many opinions. Let's just, I'm not sure that we can park it and just leave it, because the new consultation strategy, as I see it, is actually leaving the existing Newry pool out because we've voted to close it. So it isn't part of the equation. And I think that is a lost opportunity not to at least consider, because it seems to me that the pool is not in as bad a condition as I thought. Certainly the work that we have done on it since 2015 has remedied a number of problems that were highlighted by the engineers. The rest of the problems are really more wants than needs, but we could accommodate that. My point would be, if we don't include looking at a version of a revitalised Newry pool in its current location as an option, we are losing an opportunity. The other thing I would add is that, given the decision that we've made, if it takes us 5 years to come up with an aquatic solution, we'll have 4 years of no swimming at all at Newry, even if the old pool is still in usable condition, because our motion is to close it at the end of the 2021 season. I see that as problematic, and I'm not foreshadowing a rescission motion at this stage, but I don't see, if we think there's an opportunity to at least buy some time, and you know, our new potential aquatic facility might be in a different location. It might include a 30-metre pool and a splash park. We don't know, and it is going to take time to sift this all out. But I'm concerned that the haste in which we made the decision a month or so ago has actually, forced our hand without a rescission motion to do exactly that. And it also means that we can't consider its continued use in the mix as an option to put out to public consultation. Sorry, it's late in the day. I think I've probably said enough. Okay, thanks.
Leonie?
Can I just clarify my understanding? So the consultation tree, so in terms of processing the responses and the steps that we take based on that, so if it is that majority of respondents say no, does the process then abort at that stage? Or is that just noted and we still, so I'm presuming that the whole process would abort then. So at the moment, there's some base level work done in preparing to consult, which is the small feasibility on each one, which I think is a great idea, because that will give an indicative cost for each one, so that when people are actually considering the options, they have some kind of context and information to base that consideration on. So if my question is, if majority is no, does it abort at that point?
My response to that would be that we would, those milestones that I referred to, we'd bring that back to council for them to consider whether or not they felt that was compelling enough to take that course of action or not. So that would be my take on how we construct it, that it would be in a staged process, and through that process we would come back to you with reports on what the response level was for each of those elements at that point, because I don't actually know what that tipping point might be in terms of a decision from them.
Yeah. And I just, if I can, just also clarifying. So in terms of, so if it is the majority is yes, and in terms of then there be, in terms of the community just deciding between 1, 2, and 3 based on, or there being a preference, amongst 1, 2, and 3, to then move forward with one planning process for the master planning, which I presume what would happen. So when we last did a survey, and I know it was some time ago, and it may or may not have, it certainly wasn't the whole council ratepayers that would have participated, but it was a fairly decent split between the 3. How that is a potential challenge again in terms of having, it split, relatively equally between those 3. And if so, what then?
Yeah, I agree. It could be. It could get fairly complicated in that, and we part of, I guess, what we're proposing to get from the consultants is some advice and guidance around that, and whether or not through some of those other processes, not just the survey, because I think the survey is just one component of the process. It's the quantitative rather than the qualitative steps. To some extent, I think we'd need to require them to give us some guidance in relation to that by presenting that back to council, so we can talk that through as for some clarity from you as elected members. I think it's really difficult to answer that. I think the only real comparison to that is how we did the process for the RECs, which wasn't dissimilar to this, in that it did give the option to not do anything, with some other options as well, and we basically reported on the outcome of that back to council, and that then shaped further discussion and further decision making. So I think beyond that, I can't really answer.
Tony Hearn. Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Yeah, lots of good discussions tonight. 4 of us councillors were asked, or well, I don't know how many were asked, but we ventured to the Newry pool on last Saturday, and there's lots of issues with it at this stage, like with the plant room, and I had a good chat with Joe today regarding that. And Greg, that's actually running the situation at the moment, said that the filters, he doesn't want to tamper with those, because if he got them off to have a look, there could be problems. He may not get them back again. Number 3 filter can't be back flushed. The other 4 can. And the return pipe where the diving boards used to be, that's got a blockage in it. And the little pool needs to be filled up every day. So there's lots of issues that we need to consider overall.
Tony, sorry to interrupt, mate, but I want to work on the consultation side of things.
Well, yeah, but this is what so the point that John made before, that if we're going to consultation, whether we do include, if the shell of the pool is satisfactory, we should be considering flood mitigation, whether we do or don't build there at all, if the shell of the pool is okay. So what I'm saying is a lot of the pool needs to be redone, and we've got to consider that as well, because there's a lot of expense involved in that. So it's not just saying, yes, this is what we want, but we've got to realise that maybe the shell of the pool is the only thing that's salvageable, and it might be in the wrong position.
Gotcha. Kathy, and then...
Sorry, Bim, can I just butt in for a second? And I agree, all great conversation. But from an officer level, we can't put that option up. You've stopped that. So I understand what John's saying. I understand what you're all saying. So that's why I guess I was saying at the beginning, we can only work within the debate and the resolutions that you've given us. So at the moment, Joe can do no more than put that model up. If she puts something else up, she's actually breaching her, and me, by the way, because Joe's working under my instruction. I understand that point, but it's no use debating that point because we can't do anything about that.
Gotcha. Kathy.
Come back
And
to
then
me if
David.
you could, please.
Beg your pardon?
Come back to me, please. I need a few minutes.
Okay. David, I think you put an attention up that I seen. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Just a few comments. I agree partly what Dave Davies has said. I also agree with what John A has also said. I totally disagree that we should be closing a pool that is currently running to a satisfactory standard. I would say that if something big happens there to the pool and the quality of the water drops down and it's a safety issue for people using the pool, well, then we'd have to take further action. But at this stage, the pool ran all of last year and it's running again now. I've just got a record of the amount of money that the council has spent over the last number of years. And to say close it means that we've spent all that money and there's no use for it. It's like having a car that needs some repairs done on it. So we take it in the crash repair office room and we get it sprayed and fixed up and then we drive it in the wreckers. That's what we're talking about doing here. We should be keeping the pool open for the general public until really it does collapse. And that could be some time. Who knows when? But let's move on and keep the pool open for the general public. Think about all the kids that will be suffering with no pool to swim in and the general public as well. So I won't have a bar of just closing it at this stage. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I guess, David, I hear what you're saying, but I've got to reiterate that we're sort of talking about this consultation that we've agreed that we're going to go out to consultation. Can we sort of just give some direction to staff that this is the consultation process that they can move forward with?
Well, actually, just going on from there, Bim, I totally agree with the consultation process that's put up tonight. Beautiful.
That's where we need to head at this particular time. The other things might be another debate for another day, but I think we've got to stay within the confines of what Martin's highlighted to us. We've sort of made a decision. We've gone out to the general public and told them in our rates notice that we're going to move into the consultation. This is what's being presented to us tonight, and that's where we sort of need to keep our focus. Kathy, you want to gather your thoughts? Just turn your mic on. Yep.
Yes, thank you. Joe, can you tell us, please, what the time frame? I didn't catch when the time frame of this is, because from the conversations I'm having with the community, their biggest fear is that we close the pool and then it's years before we get any other facility to replace it or to have. So what's the time frame for this consultation you've put up, which just to give us an idea of what we're looking at?
Thanks, Kathy. And apologies, I was hoping that I would have had that a little bit further progressed, ready for tonight, but as I say, with the health issues, we didn't quite make that. So the plan, or my what I'm working towards with WAX is to get the survey work done whilst we're in the current season, so to get that out before we finish for Christmas. And I think we need to agree what the best time frame, the duration of that first survey component is. We've obviously been mindful that we wanted to do that while the pool was open, so that we had the best opportunity for people to that front of centre and front of mind. But in terms of how long we keep the consultation open, again, I think with the when we did the RECs, I think that it was either 2 or 3 months that we kept that survey process going. And then we're going to obviously need some further time to do the next stages. So when the intent is to bring this back to council for the November council meeting, and the plan is to have a schedule of the time frame to accompany that when I come back to you with the report. I just don't have that at the moment, but so to get the survey work done during this current pool season, but I don't think we will have the whole thing completed by the end of the current season.
Okay.
Because I think, you know, there's probably too much work in that. Obviously, we've got the feasibilities, which I do think are an important component. We've still got to get all of that work done. So I will have a better understanding of that when I come back to you with the council report.
And who did the previous consultation at Tolly Reserve? Because there's been a picture floating around called the Billabong, where a pool was put where the skate park currently is. Who did that design work?
So that was Dash, not Wax.
Dash, yeah.
And that was we never ever brought that back to council because events overtook us, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Bim, can I just chime in on that answer as well, which is a bloody good question. It does sound like a little bit of time, but it's going to link really nicely into our last conversation as well. We are stretched to the hilt, and I know there's a piece of work I need to bring back to you at some stage, and we are working on that. But this is all added workload, and we've got the $1 million drought fund. There's other stimulus money that's just come through. There's more, and so we can't absorb more. So it's going to take time.
Yeah, and I was just going to touch on that. You know, we're keen to push ahead with soccer pitches and the Southern Barossa Hub and many other things. So, yeah, we've got to be very conscious of what we're throwing at staff at this particular time. Kathy Troop.
Sorry, Bim, can I just add, and it's not just staff, because we're already getting evidence of contractors not being available because of stimulus funds.
Mm-hmm. Kathy.
Sure. My question was actually pretty much the same as Kathy Schilling's. So I was just really a little bit concerned that we go out too early. I don't think the community is actually ready at the moment to actually have that final discussion. I don't think we've journeyed them enough. I don't think that also, I think the whole plan is absolutely great. I love how it's set up. I love the yes and no system, but whether by November that is something that we, without incurring the wrath of the community, I'm not sure whether that's ready for November. That's just my personal opinion. And if we don't do it by November, is there flexibility in this question, like the yes or no and the different options? Is there flexibility to put in another option, as John was talking about, the missed opportunity? If the sentiment is so strong around the original pool, is there that option to put it back in to the question?
So I'll answer that. The very short answer right now is no. You have given us an instruction. The answer is no.
Sure. So if something was to change, is there flexibility?
The answer to that is yes.
Okay, cool. That's what I want everyone to hear. That's the answer that I wanted to hear. If something was to change, there would be some flexibility in the consultation. Yep. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
David, you got your hand up again, and John? Yes.
Yes, I have. Look, I agree with Martin, and I think that there is a sort of a way that we could move forward without where John's solution or suggestion could be inserted into it, where we could modify. I still think that we've made a decision to decommission the pool at the end of this season, but that doesn't mean that one of the solutions towards the replacement couldn't be a refurbishment of the pool on that location. So we're not just keeping it going, we're actually coming up with something new on that site, which may include some of the elements of the current pool. And I don't think that would be an issue. And if that, Martin, needed to be amended, put into some form of motion, I don't think there'd be any trouble with that. And David Haybick's made a point which I don't think is unreasonable, is that we've said, and we've given a very clear indication to the community that the pool is knackered and we need to do something about it, and fast. And the view is that the pool is going to fail. And David even had said that himself. He said that, it may well fail. And at that point, then we need to pull the pin at that stage. I am of the view that if the pool does survive this summer, and we are actively working towards a replacement, and in the next season, the potential is at minimal cost to just roll it over for another 12 months. I don't even think that requires a rescission motion. We could then just create a new motion that says, all right, well, then we will roll it over for another 12 months. And that may be viable. On the other hand, the pool could collapse on week 3 and then the problem is taken out of our hand. I think we can still be flexible with this, but at the same time, I think we've got to be realistic. We can't go out to the community and say, oh, we're going to change our mind, we're going to keep it going again, because we're just ultimately kidding ourselves. That pool is in crisis and something seriously needs to be done about it. And Kathy Troop, I take your sentiment on board, but all of the feedback I'm getting from the community is they want their say and they're screaming for information. I really do think we need to get this consultation out. I don't think we can delay it. Seriously, I think, for better or worse, we have started this process. I actually think, frankly, the process should have started probably a year before. It didn't, for all range of reasons, COVID being part of that, and such is the situation that we're dealing with. I think we all agree that this hasn't been handled in the most perfect way it could have been, but we've got to move forward. We have, at least as a council, recognised that the pool is in crisis and we need to do something about it. And we've all looked at all the various different options. And I think now we could keep talking around it for forever. The community has to be brought into the mix at this point. And I think what Joe has presented to us tonight is a very good blueprint of how we can actually go out to the community and get their feedback. People need to know what the options are. They need to know what the costs are going to be. They need to know what the impacts are going to be. And it's only after that point that I think we can then start to revisit this, because all of us, I think we all have ideas of what we think the community want. We all have ideas on what we personally would like to see happen. But again, I would really like to know how the community do feel about this. I've been getting a lot of feedback from a lot of individuals, but that's it. It's been individuals. And I've been getting mixed, depending on who you talk to. So there are some people who actually think that what we're doing makes a lot of sense. And it depends on how much information they've received. And I think at the moment, the one criticism that I am getting that I think is a fair cop from many members of the community is they don't believe that the consultation has been anything near as rigorous as it should be. They want to know more. They want to know it as soon as possible. And they're kind of confused about how we got to where we are. And I think this is a way that we can start to address that issue. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Dave. John?
Yeah, final time for the night, I hope. I find it a little bit difficult that this seems to be something that we can't discuss at a workshop. I thought this is what workshops were for. And I think the consultation strategy is first class, and I congratulate Jo on that. The point is, she's been hamstrung by our motion from the September meeting, and I believe there is sufficient appetite to have another look at the Newry pool in one form or another to be included in the consultation document. And that's all I'm suggesting. And if we can't discuss this thing at a workshop and either move an appropriate motion at the next meeting to facilitate that, or if Dave suggests, we can tweak a motion, I'm all for that. We obviously can't make a decision, but we need to try and work a way forward. Trying to do this in a council meeting is time wasting and potentially problematic. So all I'm saying is, I think we all agree all options should be put in front of the public, even if we have said the Newry pool is on life support. I don't think the life support is that critical that that I thought it was. And yeah, I think 10 to 15 to 20 years is potentially workable. And if the cost of improving and making a major improvement to the plant room at the pool is less than a brand new facility, and if that's what the people want, you know, why don't we go down that track? Okay, thanks.
Here.
So, John, what you're saying is that's the capital refurbishment of the pool.
And can I just clarify, the council can discuss any matter it wants. It can't discuss it in a fashion of making a decision or being seen to be making a decision. My caution here is exactly what Councillor Davies just said, that there are multiple people with different viewpoints. The council has made a formal decision that is an instruction to myself and my staff, and I have no problems if somebody brings something back and we have that debate and that can expand what we do. My view is that you can provide us that instruction, and I'll help you navigate the legalities of the way of doing that properly.
Okay,
Thank you.
Might talk to you tomorrow.
Look, thanks for that. So the general consensus that I'm understanding is that you're all okay with the consultation tree with some tweaking, and we'll get something to the November meeting.
So hand up from Don, Bim, you've missed.
Oh, sorry, Don. Oh, yeah, Don. Sorry.
I'll keep it very, very brief. Excellent discussion tonight, and thank you, John, for your clarity of mind. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, how are you all going? We've got 2 more items. Are you okay to keep pushing on, or do you want to, with Matt's agreement, we could move? I think we ought to just move into the stimulus fund, because that's pretty important that we get into there.
These two won't take long.
Beg your pardon?
These two won't take long.
It'll be all right, you reckon?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, we've all had tea.
Okay. Yeah. Well, speak for yourself. I've been working on a shadow cabinet presentation. Okay, carry on.
We've already written it for you.
Yeah, but I've got to put some BIMisms in there. Okay, well, right, we'll stay with the agenda as written. Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Bim. I'll just share my screen. Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Great. So this was, as you remember, was, and I assume you've read it, so I'll skim through, and if you need to raise questions, please let me know through the mayor. Thank you. So this was a question raised in the October meeting around grading performance. And this was the data that was presented, if you remember, in the quarterly performance report, where we're comparing 2018-19 to 19-20 financial year and the disparity in the 2 customer requests for grading. So I've dug out some of the data, and what's of particular interest in there between the 18-19 and 19-20 year is the grading requests from 98 to 152. What I've also showing you is those interventions that we've determined as officers don't require any work on the ground. But what's really changed, and what I was able to get from that data in the analysis, was that we now are generating internal requests. Until I get Conquest or a system in place to make those work orders, at the moment we're using the customer request system as our own internal work order system to track our workload and rate of work. And so that's something we haven't done effectively in the past. And we're also administering to service levels. So what, in terms of our patrol grading, what we're trying to do is administer to the already documented service levels. So they're the 2 major changes I just wanted to highlight that make up what I suspect is a difference in figures. The other question was asked around grader training. Look, you really don't need a lot of training technically to operate a grader. You just need the appropriate heavy vehicle license. There is now a course, it's a 5-day course that's done. It's a grader ticket that's relatively new. Previously, it would only require a HV license. But for us, for someone to become a grading operator, we tend to have 2 levels. One is patrol grading and the other is, might be final trim or when we're doing new works. We need to shadow an experienced operator, and sometimes it can take people up to 12 months and sometimes they don't get it and they don't make that cut. And that's managed internally with our operational staff. Sorry, I'm just... Okay, so there's another question around, the final slide here is just on some of the improvements we've done. So in 2018, we performed net depthing on all our unsealed roads. So that's where we went around and we checked how much material we had on the road. And we used that information to develop our 5-year resheet program. Then at the beginning of each financial year, we go around, we ground truth that, and we use different methods to verify those requirements. And that's including feedback from customer requests, feedback from our grader operators, and of course the data that we've obtained. Also, the work we're doing is drain cleaning on our rural roads. There's more work that needs to be required there, but we're doing what we can with the resources we have at the moment. We've changed some of our methodology on those roads where we have appropriate levels of material. We'll tend to rip and reform rather than resheeting. So you would note, and I've mentioned this before, our resheet program is notionally reduced slightly over the last 2 years as we've realised there's sufficient material on the roads and we can rework that existing material. And I guess in response to the comment that Don raised specifically with me, we are doing some potholing. We've only really started that in the last 12, 18 months, where instead of dry grading a road, we'll take new material out to do some of that potholing where required. That, I think, is the conclusion of that presentation. That's very quick, but is there any questions on that?
My screen hasn't lit up, Matt, so you've covered it very well. Well done.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, mate, and thanks for that information and the data. And I see you, the Conquest people in the building the other day. So you're moving, progressing well. Well done.
Thank you.
Stimulus funds, Martin.
Thanks, Bim. This is actually going to be very much like Matt's. You've got the presentation. There's one amendment. Obviously, we've outlined some of the current programs that are out there and the potential projects that are meeting some of these programs and where we're suggesting to head. And there is one particular change for, sorry, let's go back a screen to Talunda Oval. That wasn't, I missed the separation. So really the play spaces would be available for open space funding. The others would be pursued through any grassroots or state sport and rec funding. Joe, you can correct me wrong, but there's no grassroots on the current horizon, but could be again.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
And the third one is really again looking at again not just the big project, but obviously the big project was a significant investment of projects that are ready, and also outlining the rider that there is very little room to start expanding capital programs without some additional resourcing. And the comment that there is, as we go out and look for these grants now, we do factor in project costs, etc., and where necessary, we may need to add a little bit of extra funding, but it doesn't hurt our operating position. It just it's the management of cash. And in essence, what we're saying, those target sources would form a report to come to the next council to set the program for the upcoming stimulus grants that are either being announced or are about to be released. BBRF 5, the State Community Program, which we might have seen on the weekend, and start to position ourselves to take advantage of these particular grants. We obviously have chosen ones that are within the priorities that the council has chosen, and start to pursue those as they roll out. And depending on success, will depending what we bring back to the council as to how we can roll these particular things out. So fairly simple, Ben.
Thank you, sir. And with putting these applications together, because we're sort of keen to get in there as much as we can, especially with the big project priorities. Writing the grant applications, is there additional resources that you might be able to must require, or where are they at, or are they? Yeah, over to you, sir.
So the answer to that is it really just depends on the application and the process required. So BBRF is a massive process, and we have assistance with that. Something like the last round of the local roads and community infrastructure project was very simple. That was a fairly quick process. The drought funding, as another example, was a reasonably quick process that we did internally. Open spaces is reasonably heavy. Grassroots is reasonably heavy. And we will adjust resources and priorities accordingly. I mean, we obviously have grant writing expertise in the organisation, but some of it is like BBRF, which is a huge process. We need to outsource. So it's going to be a case by case, and we have some funding that can assist some of that. And it might mean that you prioritise grant writing, but then something that within the realm of someone like Heidi, Joe, Matt, myself, Gary, wherever that comes from, needs to drop off. So we'll put some processes in place, depending where we go from this, from the November council meeting, to manage that going forward.
And bearing in mind, we've also got projects on the ground that have to be, like the drought stuff, so that's going to take resources to put those things on the ground as well too, doesn't it?
Yeah, correct. I mean, the drought stuff has to be delivered by June next year, and we got the approval last week. Well, we actually still haven't got the grant application on grant agreement, and I was hoping to get that to November, but it hasn't come through as yet, so we can't start until that comes through. We're rolling out the local roads and community infrastructure project footpaths, which was only approved a few weeks ago. There's the normal capital program, there's the Angus Rec Park, there's the Stockwell Park, there's the Lindock Oval, on top of a normal $3 million reseal program, $1 million other program, stormwater, etc., etc. So yeah, correct. There is no more capacity to absorb more without additional help.
Joe, I'll let you come in, and then Kathy, and then David. Joe Thomas.
Thanks, Bim. I was just going to clarify that so while we've listed all of these different projects, there's still development work that we need to do to get them to the point where we can put the grant applications in. So they're not all just sat there waiting to be done. So really what I'm talking about is for each of those projects, to get the grant applications in, you have to basically have all of the reasonably high level concept drawings and designs done. They have to be costed. You have to have a program of works. We try and get in any development approvals actually applied for, so that we can tick that box when we go into the application. So there's 3 or 4 of these projects which are still have got a lot of work still to do within the next month or so to get them to that point. So the point about resourcing is an important one, because it's all doable, but there's a lot to get all the ducks in the line with getting them in.
And sorry, to add to what Joe's talking about, we can't do all those, but we got to play a smart grant strategy. You just can't put everything in as well. So something like LR CIP will need to be delivered in 12 months. So if we go and get all those, you're not going to deliver them all in 12 months. So it's it's about whatever feedback we get today, we'll then prioritise this next round and bring it back to the council for ratification.
Thanks. Kathy Schilling.
Yes, Joe, the Creative Industries Centre, is that referring to the Culture Hub or on page 3?
Yes.
Okay, and I was in a meeting with the soccer club. I believe that plan has progressed. Is that sort of nearly ready, or how far is the soccer pitch project going? You know, how far along are you with that one?
So that one's moving on at quite a pace. We're pretty much there with the design for the changing rooms and the club rooms. We've done a modified version of the Newry football changing rooms because we also have some reasonable costings on that. And we're also working very closely with the CEO at Football SA, which is soccer in your language, but they all still refer to it as football. They have significant experience and contacts to deal with the football pitch component, and we can just tap into all of that so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I'm trying to get a meeting with them in the next week to try and get that bit of the jigsaw puzzle sorted. So I think I'm pretty confident that we can get that to pull together pretty quickly. We have done a lot of work, and the club has been exceptional in terms of getting its needs analysis work done as well to help. So that one is in a reasonable position, I think.
Yeah, I was very impressed at their approach and how they're moving forward in a way to embrace a new centre and getting their sponsorship and everything in line. So yeah, it was pretty impressive to hear what they were working towards. So.
David Davies.
Yeah, keep it quick. Martin, great work. And yeah, you get my thumbs up.
Thank you. Okay. Next item. Continuation of workshop online.
You'll be pleased there's no slides for this one, and I think it's pretty obvious. So some time ago we talked about, at the end of the day, calling workshops it's within my responsibility. But 3 months ago we talked about the success of this particular forum and how it suits reasonably well. Got the technology sorted, so it's about getting some feedback where council want to go on the continuation or the movement back into chamber. So the 3 months is up at the end of this month.
Any thoughts? Yep. Leonie.
I'm very supportive of doing it online. I think it gives, good flexibility, and it's, means we can still keep talking and not have travel issues.
Thank you. David Hobick.
I believe we should go back into chambers for the meeting because I think we've lost a bit of contact with one another, only meeting in chambers once a month. I think we need to have a bit more contact, and it's a bit strange at times, especially with guest speakers.
Don?
I'm similar view to Dave Hobick. I'd very much like to get back into the chamber, and I've got the greatest distance to travel, and you'll never get a complaint about me travelling at night time or anything like that. I just believe it's imperative we sort of get together and meet, and I watched how we struggled tonight with the IT and trying to get maps up and plans up, and it's just so frustrating down the other end and trying to deal with that. So I'd very much like to get back in the chamber. Thank you.
I think that demonstration would have still struggled in the chamber too because of the remoteness of where he's trying to log into. But okay, thanks for that. Tony, and then Kathy.
Yeah,
True.
Yes, I'd concur with both Dave and Don. I like the fact that we can sit in the chamber and it's a different ambience altogether. and you just get a different feel for the whole thing. And if you've got something to discuss afterwards, you're all in the one place. So I would be in favour of saying the trial was okay, but there are difficulties, and I commend the staff on what they're doing, and Martin and his IT team. But I just think we should get back into the chamber as well.
Kathy Troop.
I do like online, but I understand what everyone else is saying about the contact. Perhaps we could think about doing a mix, because it might be something that we can do every couple of, every so often, so that, their working people can actually, don't have to do the yards, and the people who live a long way, perhaps the lighter workshops, we might be able to work out to do it like that. I don't know, just a thought.
David, Davies.
Yeah, Kathy pretty much stole my thunder. I'm pretty easy either way. I like the idea of having, like David, contact with each other, and I think it's a shame that we're losing some of that. But I don't think it necessarily has to be every month. I like Kathy's idea, and I was sort of thinking along similar lines, that there are some workshops which are a bit lighter, where we don't have people coming from outside, and I think those would handle very well online. But if it's something where we're going to have community interest, where people want to come along and view, part of the reason why we moved the workshops from 5:30 at night to 6:30 was so that people could actually come along and attend and make presentation. So I think I'd be more than happy to leave it to BIM and Martin's discretion, and so that, on those occasions where people want to come along and attend, they're making a presentation or whatever, maybe at least once every quarter, then we should meet live. And then on those workshops where they become a little bit kind of formal, when I say formal, a little bit more kind of just the nuts and bolts of council, which I don't think the community would be quite as excited about, I think those could be handled quite well in this format. So I like Kathy's idea of a bit of a mix. I think that could work quite well.
Don?
Quite happy with the mix.
Thank you. Martin?
Thanks. I'm just going to throw another curveball. And what about a hybrid, where people can't get to the meeting if it is in the thing? So we are moving to conferencing system in the chamber.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
You all understand? Yep.
Can you just explain that a bit more, Martin?
Well, those that can't attend in person can attend on a conference call, just like this.
Oh, okay.
And
I mean, I've done that in the past where I couldn't make it, so I just came in by phone. So that can work.
So, Martin, are you suggesting that we could then still see if Dave, for instance, was stuck in Adelaide and wanted to come up, that he could do that, and we could put that onto a screen or something like that? Is that the idea of it all?
Exactly what you're doing now.
Yep.
Okay.
John?
Yeah, look, I think it's all been said, but I would endorse the fact that the public need to have some access to the more pertinent subjects that arise that we know are of public interest. But for routine sort of briefings, I have no problem with doing electronically. But like Don, I don't mind travelling, or a mixture of both, and a hybrid is fine.
Bim, I reckon if there's something only small, a couple of quick agenda items that might, like we've had sometimes where it's only 10 or 15 minutes and they've been over, I think that. But once we get big long ones like we did today, it is a bit difficult at times, just sitting there for a couple of hours looking at a screen.
Kathy Troop?
Just a quick question really for Martin. I guess I really like the fact that the recording is being done and people can see us. Can that still be done even when we're in chamber?
Muted,
Martin.
Hit the wrong button. Absolutely. I wouldn't propose to be live streaming workshops because that requires more IT resource. My hybrid model is that because not everybody actually likes traveling in the late at night either. My hybrid model is really people could choose, but and my third comment about what you just said, Kathy, is we get a hell of a lot more hits on what's online than we do have people coming in the chamber.
Yeah, and that's what I want to keep going, because I think that's why, you know, if we do have hybrid, then that would be available online. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, if we're going to run you could still run a recording, absolutely, at a workshop and post it, no matter what the model is, where we're heading with the technology, for sure.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Well, that technology already exists, but we don't have the full conferencing opportunity within the chamber, which you need to be doing this. So I guess my comment about accessibility to the community, the electronic experience so far is that is much more accessible than coming into the chamber at 7 p.m. on Wednesday night.
Yep, correct. Yep. Yeah, and that's the element that I would hate to lose if we went back into chamber, and that was, you know, that whole online element would be lost. So yeah, if we could work out a way that we could continue, even if we are in chamber, to record it, would be
fantastic. David Habeck.
Yeah, just briefly, I don't mind half and half. I just think that some of the short meetings that we've had, special meetings, should be done the way we're doing this tonight. But the long ones, like tonight, I believe should be in chambers.
Okay. I'll do as I'm told, I suppose. There were some thoughts about Martin and I making a decision, or are we just going to run with the hybrid?
I reckon you two, I trust you to, you know, pick the appropriate venue and appropriate format on the appropriate occasion.
Right. Weren't we just talking about smaller meetings and things like that, though?
And then if you screw it up, we'll take it away from you.
Yeah, no, look, I think we got the gist of where everyone wants to go. So, yeah, no, it's cool. Okay, good. Thank you, everybody. That's our agenda. Martin, you might wish to shut the recording. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.